Welcome to Starbound, where every star tells a story. Ever wondered what it's like to crash on an alien world and fight for survival against unknown threats? Let's get into the story. The hum of the shuttle's engines was a lullaby to Alex. He'd done these scouting missions dozens of times. Slip in, survey, and get out before they even knew you were there. Most planets were barren rocks or toxic wastelands. It was the rare one, the one with a breathable atmosphere and signs of mineable resources that was worth fighting for. Incoming, the pilot's voice crackled over the comms. Planetfall in 5, standard recon pattern, people. In and out. Don't get cocky. Alex checked his gear, the familiar weight of his exosuit comforting. Sure, it didn't pack the firepower of some of the heavy suits, but it didn't need to. Scout missions required speed and flexibility. The shuttle descended, breaking through a thick layer of clouds into a bright blue sky. Below, a lush green world spread out, a sharp contrast to the dying Earth they had left behind. Readings look good, the pilot said. Atmosphere's breathable. Some interesting spikes in energy readings down there, though. Keep your eyes peeled. Alex peered down as they swept over dense jungle, the trees blurring into a green carpet. Then he saw it, a clearing, and in the clearing, structures. Not ruins, not natural formations, but smooth metal buildings shaped like elongated pyramids. Whoa, he breathed, punching in the coordinates. Pilot, hold position. Looks like we got ourselves a live one. The engines whined as the shuttle maneuvered, making a slow circle above the alien structures. They shimmered dully in the sunlight, an ominous presence in the vibrant green of the jungle. Alex frowned. The energy readings the pilot had mentioned seemed to be emanating from them, a sure sign of active technology. Command, this is Scout Team Alpha. We've got a possible intelligent contact, requesting updated mission parameters, he said into his comm. Silence stretched out on the line for a heart-stopping moment. Then the reply came, tense and urgent. Alpha, recon only. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage. Return to extraction point immediately. Alex's blood ran cold. Command, these structures, they weren't in the mission briefing. Negative, Command snapped back. Extract now. That's an order. The pilot swore softly and punched the controls, reluctantly turning the shuttle away. But it was too late. A harsh buzzing filled Alex's ears, a weapon locking onto their craft. Evasive maneuvers, he yelled, even as the bright beam of energy lanced down from the sky. The shuttle bucked and shuddered violently, the blast tearing through its side. Smoke and sparks filled the cabin as alarms screamed. Alex clung to his seat, adrenaline surging as the pilot frantically fought for control. We're hit! We're hit! The pilot shouted over the chaos. Losing altitude? Brace for impact! Alex barely had time to brace when the shuttle crashed into the thick jungle canopy like a meteor. The sickening crunch of metal, the explosion of airbags, and the sudden horrifying silence were all a blur. When his head finally cleared, all Alex could hear was the pounding of his heart and the groan of twisted metal around him. Pain flared hot and sharp in his side as he struggled to his feet, scanning the wreckage. Pilot! He called out hoarsely. The pilot's seat was a mangled mess of metal and plastic. Mike? Anyone? His voice echoed in the wreckage. He was alone. Alex took a ragged breath, forcing himself to focus. Shock was a luxury he couldn't afford. First things first, he needed to get the emergency beacon activated. Scrambling through the debris, he found his pack, miraculously intact amongst the shattered remains of the shuttle. He fumbled for the beacon, a small, palm-sized device that could make the difference between rescue and death on this unknown planet. He pressed the activation button, and nothing happened. Again and again he pressed, a wave of despair washing over him. The beacon was dead, crushed in the crash. Now the panic truly set in. He was stranded, alone on a hostile world. Even if he survived, what then? The trees around him thrummed with alien life. Any moment, the owners of those strange metal structures could arrive to investigate the crash site. He couldn't stay here. He had to get away, disappear into the thick foliage. Cursing his light scout suit, built for speed rather than protection, Alex ripped a strip of cloth from his sleeve and pressed it against the gash on his side, gritting his teeth against the sting of antiseptic. Movement caught his eye, a flicker of dull metal just beyond the wreckage. His heart hammered. Had they come for him already? Alex sank into a crouch, muscles taut, then slowly edged towards the source of the movement. It wasn't what he expected. An alien drone, roughly the size of a human fist, lay broken amongst the leaves. Its silvery casing was cracked, revealing intricate circuits and wiring. He reached out a hesitant hand. It didn't move, no hum or flicker of light to suggest life. Gingerly, he flipped it over. The strange energy beam that had taken down their shuttle seemed to have originated from this little device. Alex frowned. This drone seemed too small, too crude to be the sole weapon of an advanced civilization. The drone sparked a flicker of hope. He couldn't explain why, just an instinct that analyzing this piece of alien technology might hold a key to his survival. Alex carefully pocketed the device. It might be useless, but it was the only lead he had right now. In the smoking wreckage of the shuttle behind, he delved into the dense jungle. Branches whipped his face, thorns tore at his clothes, and the humid air clung to his skin like a suffocating cloak. His injured side throbbed, and his stomach churned with hunger and fear. He was hopelessly out of his element. Then he heard the noises, squawks, screeches, and the rustling of unseen things in the undergrowth. He froze, holding his breath, as his eyes scanned the green shadows for anything that moved. Earth's jungles were a paradise compared to this. Every plant and creature here could be hostile, venomous, waiting to make him their next meal. Suddenly, something slammed into his side, throwing him off balance. Alex cried out as he fell, his injured ribs screaming in protest. He thrashed around on the leafy ground, scrambling for the weapon he barely remembered to bring. His fingers closed on the hilt of his vibroblade, and he slashed wildly at the blur of fur and teeth that pinned him down. The creature yipped in pain, and Alex found himself staring into the frightened eyes of a furry, four-legged animal. It whimpered, clutching at a bloodied shoulder. Relief washed over him, quickly replaced by a surge of guilt. He hadn't asked for this, none of this. They had invaded this world, these creatures' home. He cautiously backed away, keeping his blade ready for defense. The animal retreated as well, eyeing him with suspicion. He was the monster in this world. Nightfall came swiftly. The unfamiliar constellations glittered in the sky as Alex burrowed into a hollow log, too exhausted to care about the spiders and beetles sharing his makeshift shelter. Sleep was a fitful thing, broken by the terrifying screeches that filled the alien night, and memories of the crash, the mangled bodies of his team. He awoke with the first rays of dawn, a hollow ache in his chest. He had to focus, keep moving. His top priority was finding water, then food, and hopefully high ground. If he could get a clear vantage point, he might be able to locate the alien structures again. His fingers brushed against the drone in his pocket. Understanding their tech, their weaknesses, might be his only chance to tip the scales of this unexpected war. Days blurred into one another as Alex struggled through the relentless humidity and teeming life of the jungle. His scout suit, designed for stealth and quick maneuvers, offered little protection against the constant onslaught of the elements. It was as if the planet itself was fighting back against his intrusion. Each new day became a test of his adaptability, a trait humanity had honed over millennia of survival. As a young recruit, he'd endured countless drills enhancing his body's unique ability to rapidly change muscle mass and density. It was this trait that differentiated humanity from so many other spacefaring races. It was why he was out here, instead of one of the hulking, heavily armored troops. Sometimes raw strength was what he needed. When a vine, thick as a man's arm, blocked his path, he was able to bulk up momentarily, his muscles swelling beneath his suit, granting him the leverage needed to tear it aside. But other times, only lean swiftness would do. Crouched at the banks of a muddy river, he observed lumbering creatures with tusks like spears. He held his breath, willing his body to shrink, to become as insignificant as possible. They never even noticed him slip by. It was during these quiet moments that he studied the broken drone. He scavenged a smooth stone to use as a tool, carefully prying open its casing. Inside was a maze of circuitry, far more intricate than the crude hunter-killer designs he'd expected. Alex had been a tinkerer since he was a child, disassembling and rebuilding everything he could get his hands on. It was the reason the scouts had picked him for missions like this. With growing excitement, he discovered the key component, a small, crystalline power source unlike anything he'd encountered before. The energy thrummed faintly beneath his fingers, and remarkably, it seemed to respond to his touch. As he focused on it, the energy signature would alter, cycling through different frequencies like it was mirroring his own state. The planet itself seemed built on adaptability. Animals changed colors to blend with their surroundings. Plants altered their chemical makeup to ward off predators. Could it be that the aliens had based their technology on this same principle? If so, then perhaps that single drone held the secrets of their entire civilization. His stomach growled, reminding him that no matter how fascinating the tech, his own survival depended on finding food. The berries and roots he'd tentatively tested had been, at best, unpalatable, and at worst, left him doubled over with cramps. What he needed was protein, and that meant going on the hunt. He would need to adapt once again, this time not just in body but in mind. He had to become a predator on this alien world. Alex spent hours tracking his prey. It was a creature vaguely resembling an earth deer, with long, graceful legs and velvety antlers. But what set it apart was its coat-shimmering scales that shifted from blues to greens, blending it seamlessly with the vibrant foliage. One minute it was clearly there, the next it seemed to melt into the background. He couldn't take any chances. One missed shot would mean startling his prey and, quite possibly, attracting the attention of bigger, far more dangerous predators. Alex took slow, measured breaths, sinking into a state of absolute focus. This wasn't just hunting for food. This was a test of his ability to adapt to his environment. As he moved, he paid close attention to his own body. He willed his muscles to stay lean and supple, moving with stealth rather than brute force. He could hear the creature up ahead, the gentle rustling of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig. He spotted it suddenly, standing in a small clearing. Just as he'd seen before, the shimmering scales of its hide made it almost indistinguishable from its surroundings. But Alex was prepared. Drawing his vibroblade, he crept closer, matching his pace to the gentle breeze. His fingers brushed the textured hilt of the blade that thrummed softly in sympathy with his heightened senses. Closer, closer. Just a few meters more, his lungs burned for air, but he forced himself to remain absolutely still. The alien deer raised its head, sniffing, but the wind carried his scent away from it. Just another part of the landscape, another plant perhaps. And then, with a surge of adrenaline, Alex charged. With a startled bleat, the deer turned to bolt, but he was faster. He'd adapted his body for speed, for a single decisive strike. The vibroblade sliced through the air and found its mark. The creature let out a pained cry and collapsed to the forest floor. A sense of guilt washed over Alex, quickly replaced with the stark reality of his situation. He'd survived, at least for now. Back at his makeshift camp, he skillfully butchered his prey. The meat was tough and stringy, but cooked over a small fire, it was sustenance. He saved the glittering scales, marveling at their strange beauty and wondering if they could be the base material for an adaptive camouflage of his own. As he worked, the drone lay beside him, exposed components gleaming. He picked it up, the crystal once more humming quietly beneath his touch. With fresh resolve, he focused on the alien object. They were technologically advanced. They had those structures, the energy beam weapons. They should have had something to monitor this drone, to track it. He narrowed his eyes, concentrating on that faint energy thread connecting the crystal to his own body. If he could isolate that signal, perhaps amplify it, could he trick the aliens into thinking the drone was still operational, still where they'd left it? It was a long shot, but it was the best chance he had to understand their weaknesses, and maybe, just maybe, turn the tide against them. Alex spent the remaining daylight hours tinkering with the drone. He used the salvaged scales and scraps from his suit to mimic its outer casing, painstakingly recreating the sleek metallic sheen. Internally, he manipulated the crystal's energy signature, pushing it out like a beacon. It was clumsy compared to the elegance of the original design, but the core function was there. A signal that pulsed with the same frequency as before, now emanating from the heart of the dense jungle. As darkness descended, he found a secure vantage point high in the canopy of a giant tree. Clinging to the thick branches, he waited. His heart pounded in anticipation, a strange mix of fear and a thrill he hadn't felt in years. Below him, the vibrant colors of the forest faded to a muted gray. Then, a flicker of light pierced the gloom. A single silvery drone identical to the one he'd destroyed. It hovered above the spot where he'd disguised the wreck of the shuttle, scanning the darkness. Alex held his breath, willing his heartbeat to quiet. After a tense minute, the search drone zipped off in another direction, presumably called away on some other task. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. He'd fooled the enemy, gained a tiny bit of control in this hostile environment. The incident sparked a relentless determination in Alex. It was time to stop merely surviving. It was time for the counterattack. He began to see the jungle not as an enemy, but as an ally. It had provided him with sustenance and shelter. If he could harness its adaptive nature, it could offer even more advantages. He studied the plants and animals around him, the insects that glowed with bioluminescence, attracting their prey right into a deadly ambush, the vines that responded to the lightest tremors in the air, warning him of lurking danger. It was a world built on adaptability, a symphony of shifting forms and defenses. With renewed focus, he began analyzing the alien tech. The drone, even in its damaged state, revealed a fascinating truth. The aliens did seem to mimic the planet's natural adaptability. Their technology shifted form and function, its energy signatures altering to serve different purposes. But there was a limitation. Their tech was dependent on a central control system, a network he sensed in the faint signals they emitted. If he could find a way to disrupt those signals, their very strength could become a fatal weakness. Their weapons, their shields, even their communication systems, all of it might overload and fail if the balance of their technology was thrown off. That central hub had to be his target. He didn't have the firepower to take them on directly, but with stealth and his newfound understanding of their systems, Alex had another weapon: sabotage. The humans had a saying, "Fight fire with fire." But he was fighting with something far more potent: adaptability itself. It was the reason humans had survived countless challenges across millennia, and it would be the reason he would survive this one. He just needed to find their headquarters. Finding the alien base proved far more challenging than Alex had anticipated. He tracked sporadic drone activity, but they crisscrossed the jungle with no clear pattern. Following them blindly meant falling into almost certain traps. He needed a better vantage point, a view from above to chart their movements. One sweltering afternoon, he nearly tripped over the solution. A plant with broad, dish-shaped leaves, perched atop sturdy stems. The glossy green leaves seemed designed to gather sunlight. An idea sparked in Alex's mind: a makeshift aerial drone. With nimble fingers and scavenged materials, he modified his emergency locator beacon, cannibalizing its minimal tech and rigging it to the leaves of the plant. He coaxed the broad leaves upward, using their natural inclination for sunlight to loft the beacon into the open air. It swayed and bobbed precariously, a laughably primitive scout compared to the sleek alien drones. But it worked. Through his suit's visual interface, he could see what the beacon saw. From above, the jungle canopy appeared as a continuous ocean of green, broken only by clearings where the gleaming metal pyramids stood. There were more of them than he initially thought, scattered at strategic intervals, each a potential hive of alien activity. One structure was significantly larger, its silver sheen brighter under the relentless sun. This, he realized with a surge of adrenaline, this had to be the nexus, the heart of their operations. Alex studied its location, plotting a course. It wasn't close, but if he moved systematically, using the cover of the jungle, he stood a chance. The trek tested his endurance. Each hour brought a new challenge to overcome, a new way to adapt to the jungle's dangers. He smeared his skin with pungent mud to mask his scent from predators. He learned to identify edible vines and to purify water from stagnant pools. Every obstacle became a lesson in survival, his body responding to the harsh demands by shedding excess weight or bulking up for brief bursts of power when needed. As he neared the central pyramid, he realized with a jolt that adaptation alone wouldn't be enough. The structure was heavily patrolled by drones and what he could only assume were alien guards, beings encased in sleek exoskeletons, their movements precise and unnaturally swift. He had to mimic those movements, alter his body's energy signature to blend into their environment. Crouching in the undergrowth, he focused on the crystal core of the broken drone, pushing his own energy to match the rigid, robotic patterns of the alien technology. It was difficult, almost painful, to deny his natural fluidity for that controlled, calculated movement. But with each hesitant step, with each practiced gesture, he felt himself changing, becoming less human and more alien. It wasn't enough to just look the part. He had to move like them, act like them. His fate depended on his ability to become something he wasn't. Disguised as one of their own, Alex infiltrated the perimeter of the alien base. His heart pounded, a discordant rhythm against the steady hum of the alien machinery. His artificially rigid posture was a constant, uncomfortable counterpoint to his true instinct to coil and flex, ready to spring into action. Inside, the corridors were smooth, metallic. devoid of the vibrant chaos of the jungle. Guards patrolled on precise schedules, their armored exoskeletons clicking softly on the polished floor. Alex forced himself to match their measured steps, his eyes hidden behind his helmet, scanning his surroundings for access points or anything that might reveal a vulnerable point in their operation. The heart of the base proved to be a vast chamber thrumming with energy. Alien technicians hunched over consoles that flickered with indecipherable data streams. All around the room, massive crystalline structures pulsed with power, their rhythmic hum setting Alex's teeth on edge. His instincts screamed at him. This was the source of their control network, the key to disrupting their technology and crippling their entire operation. Alex crept closer, keeping his movements minimal as he analyzed the layout. To his surprise, the chamber was not nearly as heavily guarded as he'd expected. It seemed the aliens, overconfident in their advanced technology, didn't anticipate sabotage from within their own ranks. That would be their fatal mistake. He located an air vent, its metal grill barely noticeable in the sleek design of the wall. Using a tool chipped from the base of one of the crystalline structures, he meticulously removed the cover, revealing a cramped, dimly lit access shaft. Leaving his improvised alien disguise behind, he squeezed into the opening. He couldn't maintain the rigid posture inside the cramped space, but speed and stealth were his priorities now. Maneuvered through the maze of ventilation shafts, the pulse of the energy network a constant throb against his skin. It was uncomfortable, a dissonance he would have to endure if he wanted to succeed. Finally, Alex emerged into a small utility room overlooking the control center. The alien technicians were still at their stations, oblivious to the threat lurking right above them. Alex's pulse quickened as he carefully removed his backpack. Inside, amongst his survival gear, was the real weapon, his makeshift bomb. It was crude, cobbled together from power cells scavenged from the shuttle wreckage and remnants of the broken drone. He'd modified the energy crystal from the drone, intentionally destabilizing it, designed to release a surge of conflicting frequencies into the alien network. With trembling hands, he set the timer and carefully lowered the device into the control room. There was no turning back now. Alex scurried back into the ventilation system, backtracking with painstaking precision. His only hope was to get far enough away when the bomb detonated. Alex was betting that the overload would disable the alien base, throw their systems into chaos, and buy him and his people back on Earth a chance to regroup, to retaliate. It was a desperate gamble, but it was the only chance for humanity's survival in this hostile new world. Alex crawled desperately through the ventilation system, the hum of the alien tech a relentless metronome in his ears. His heart pounded a frantic rhythm, each thud echoing the countdown in his mind. Minutes. Seconds. Light suddenly speared into the shaft ahead of him, alien voices barking orders. His stomach clenched. Discovery. They must have found his discarded disguise, realized their defenses were breached. He was out of time. With a surge of panic and adrenaline, he changed his tactics. Shoving aside the flimsy vent cover, he erupted into a brightly lit side corridor. Before he could think, before a single alarm could blare, he charged. The force of his momentum, coupled with the surprise of his appearance, knocked the two nearest guards off their feet. Their exoskeletons let out electronic whines as they struggled to regain balance, their movements clumsy and uncoordinated against his unexpected attack. The other alien warriors reacted with chilling speed, their weapons whirring to life. Alex was a blur of motion, muscle memory honed by years of combat training taking over. He ducked, weaved, and unleashed a furious torrent of kicks and strikes. The confined corridor gave them no advantage, their superior firepower useless at such close range. But he couldn't keep this up forever. Every hit, glancing or solid, reverberated through his body, screaming at him to shift back to a defensive posture. But time was not on his side. He seized his chance when a hulking guard stumbled, its exoskeleton creaking in protest. Pivoting, Alex channeled his weight into a final devastating blow, striking directly below the creature's oversized helmet. It buckled, collapsing into a lifeless heap. Alex didn't have time to process his victory. He vaulted the fallen guard, racing towards the chamber, towards the ticking time bomb of his own creation. He barreled into the control room, a human whirlwind amongst the stunned alien technicians. They turned, weapons raised, but he was faster. As blasts of energy seared towards him, he dove, rolling behind a console. The energy blast punched a smoking hole into the wall just above his head. And then, the detonation. The chamber imploded in a silent flash of light. The pulse of the alien tech stuttered. then surged violently, throwing sparks and twisting metal. Alex braced himself, the wave of unstable energy washing over him like a breaking wave. For an eternity, there was only chaos. Energy arcs whipped through the air, consoles overloaded and burst into flames. The aliens screamed alien curses, their exoskeletons stuttering and jerking, their rigid movements now their downfall. Blinded and deafened, Alex clung to the debris, willing himself to wait out the storm. Each ragged breath was an act of defiance. Then, finally, blessed silence. Alex lay motionless, waiting for his senses to return. His ears rang, his vision blurred. Slowly, the world began to right itself. The room was a smoking ruin, the air acrid and thick with the smell of burnt metal and ozone. Alien bodies lay scattered, their exoskeletons sparking and twitching, their systems failing in the aftermath of the energy overload. He was alive. The bomb had worked. Staggering to his feet, Alex stumbled through the wreckage, his vision slowly returning. He searched the room, seeking any sign of life. With a jolt, his eyes focused on a flickering console in the far corner of the room. A final message pulsed across the screen in a universal code. Distress signal sent. Reinforcements requested. ETA. Unknown. They hadn't been alone. Alex's blood ran cold. He'd only delayed the inevitable, bought humanity a sliver of time before the true extent of the alien forces descended upon them. Now he had to move. There was no time to celebrate. Grabbing what supplies he could salvage, he sprinted from the ruins of the pyramid. Back into the jungle, into the unknown. He had to warn his people, tell them everything he'd learned about the aliens, their strengths, their weaknesses, and above all, the potential that lay within the ever-adapting human spirit. Alex ran, his muscles burning, pushing himself past his limits. He'd become more than a mere scout. He was now a blueprint, a living proof that humanity's adaptability wasn't just a trait. It was their greatest weapon. His steps were swift and sure as he plunged deeper into the dense foliage. The jungle, once a relentless enemy, was now his sanctuary. He could feel the change in himself, the lessons of this harsh world sinking into his very bones. They could have their advanced technology, their rigid exoskeletons. Alex had something far greater, the ability to change, to overcome, to survive no matter what the universe threw at him. He ran not as a lone soldier, but as a symbol of the unrelenting force of human evolution. And when the alien reinforcements inevitably came, they would discover that they weren't just fighting a species. They were fighting the very essence of adaptation itself. The distorted image of Earth flickered on the screen, a blue marble marred by fiery explosions. Alex gritted his teeth, a surge of anger and despair washing over him. He'd made it back, barely, after weeks of trekking through the treacherous jungle. Now, the weight of his responsibility settled heavily upon him. "They're already here." General Carter, a weathered woman with steely eyes, confirmed what the image had already revealed. Multiple landing zones across the globe. They seemed to be prioritizing major population centers. The room crackled with a tense silence. Alex fought the urge to pace. He had days' worth of intel, lessons learned from the alien tech, their vulnerabilities. But would it be enough? "Sir," he finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Their tech is advanced, but it relies on a central network. If we can disrupt it, we can cripple their communication, their coordinated attacks." General Carter leaned forward, her gaze sharp. "How? And what are their weaknesses?" He recounted his experiences, the drone network, the central hub, the energy core susceptible to destabilization. It was a desperate gamble, but it was their only shot. Humanity, he emphasized, needed to adapt its tactics. The following days were a blur of activity. Scientists pored over Alex's findings, their eyes gleaming with a mixture of fascination and fear. Engineers scrambled, retrofitting existing weapons with salvaged alien tech, hoping to create a weapon capable of overloading the alien network. Soldiers, their faces grim, trained in guerrilla warfare, learning to blend in, to anticipate the rigid movements of their enemy. The first wave of attacks was met with a desperate fury. Cities were reduced to rubble, makeshift shelters overflowing with wounded. But humanity fought back, adapting as they always had. Drones disguised as birds weaved through the alien ranks, causing havoc. Buildings with self-destruct mechanisms, inspired by the broken drone, took down entire platoons of alien soldiers. Alex, his body barely healed from his ordeal, became a living legend. Videos of his exploits, defying alien technology with his adaptable body, were broadcast across the globe, a beacon of hope in a bleak time. But he was only one man. One day, the news arrived. A massive alien armada was approaching Earth. They were sending reinforcements, a display of overwhelming force. Despair threatened to engulf Alex, but General Carter's voice cut through the fog. "This is our chance," she said, her eyes glittering with a dangerous spark. "We've been testing a weapon based on your tech analysis. It's risky, untested. We might not get another shot." Alex knew the risks. Overloading the network could fry their own tech as well, but there was no turning back. He nodded, a grim determination settling over him. The attack came at dawn. The sky crackled with energy blasts, the ground trembled beneath the weight of alien war machines, but this time, humanity fought differently. Their soldiers, camouflaged and agile, attacked from the shadows. Hacking teams, inspired by Alex's experience in the alien base, infiltrated the enemy lines, sowing chaos within their networks. Then came the moment of truth. With a deep breath, Alex activated the weapon, a cobbled-together device humming with unstable energy. It felt wrong, unnatural in his hands. He aimed it skyward towards the approaching alien armada. The world went white. A wave of energy, raw and chaotic, surged through the air. The alien ships sputtered, lights flickering, their movements erratic. Communication channels went dead. For a glorious, terrifying moment, the siege seemed to hold its breath. Then, pandemonium erupted. Alien soldiers fought amongst themselves, their rigid movements faltering. Ships collided, raining down debris and fiery explosions. The overload held, disrupting the central network, throwing the alien forces into disarray. But the victory was fragile. The aliens were still formidable, and the weapon had taken its toll on Earth's own systems. As the dust settled, Alex surveyed the battlefield, the taste of ash and victory heavy in his mouth. The siege was far from over, but humanity had taken a stand. They had learned to adapt, to fight fire with their own brand of unpredictable chaos. The war for Earth had just begun, but in the face of an overwhelming enemy, humanity had found a flicker of hope, a testament to their enduring spirit, the spirit of adaptation. Weeks stretched into months, the siege of Earth a brutal symphony of destruction and desperate defiance. The planet was scarred, cities reduced to rubble. But humanity, their resolve fueled by the success of the initial network disruption, refused to give in. Adaptability was now their mantra, a driving force pushing back against the rigid control of their alien foes. Alex became a shadow commander, his knowledge of the aliens crucial to planning hit-and-run attacks. His body was a constant battleground, alternating between lean agility for stealth missions and bulky muscle mass for raw confrontations. Each transformation was painful, a reminder of the toll adaptation was taking on him. He was becoming less human with every battle. One night, he infiltrated an alien outpost, eavesdropping on a chilling transmission. "The humans!" an alien commander rasped, his voice a discordant symphony of clicks and whirs. "Their chaotic behavior disrupts our systems. It's unacceptable." A second voice, colder, hissed in response. "Increase energy output, force adaptation on a larger scale, break them until they conform." Alex's blood ran cold. They understood the human advantage and were planning to counter it with devastating force. He barely escaped, carrying the grim news back to command. "They're going to weaponize the network," he told General Carter. "Overload it with such massive energy spikes that even we won't be able to adapt fast enough." The general's steely gaze hardened. "They mean to turn our strength into our undoing," she murmured. "How long, Alex?" "Days, maybe weeks. Their ships are already moving into position." The war room fell silent, heavy with the unspoken cost of adaptation. They'd pushed their limits, forced their bodies into strange new forms for the sake of survival. Would it be enough? It was Dr. Park, a quiet, bespectacled bioengineer, who finally spoke. "There's a theory," he began hesitantly. "Forced adaptation always has a breaking point. The body can only change so much, so fast. Maybe that's the key." His words sparked a flicker of hope. The aliens, with their over-reliance on technology and rigid structures, had never truly faced such a fundamental biological limit. From this desperate seed, a new strategy blossomed. Alex, along with teams of scientists and soldiers, retreated into secret underground labs. They worked in shifts fueled by caffeine and adrenaline, studying the alien tech, pushing their own bodies to the breaking point and then beyond, seeking the boundaries of adaptation. Their efforts culminated in a weapon so terrifying it was almost a mirror of the alien threat, a network pulse, not designed to disrupt, but to overload. It would target the aliens' exoskeletons, forcing them to adapt rapidly, shattering their very physiology. Simultaneously, a daring plan was put in motion. If they were to survive the pulse, they needed protection. Human exoskeletons. Crude prototypes were built, rigid and cumbersome, mere shadows of the sleek alien machines, but they were a last resort, a tool born out of desperate necessity. As the alien armada amassed overhead, casting a suffocating net of warships around the planet, humanity held its breath. The day of reckoning arrived. The first blast of the pulse wave rippled outwards. The ground shook. Birds fell from the sky. And across the globe, the aliens shuddered, their exoskeletons buckling, their movement systems faltering. But some recovered faster than anticipated. The second, more powerful pulse was launched, sending shockwaves through the planet. Alex, locked in a hastily constructed exoskeleton, watched as the aliens writhed and collapsed around him. The victory was horrifying, mirroring the aliens' own tactics. When the dust settled, the world was changed. The alien invasion force was crippled, some permanently disabled, others still operational but desperately confused by the chaos they had inadvertently wrought. Human casualties, too, were high, their losses a painful reminder of the sacrifices forced upon them. Though the war wasn't over, a shift had occurred. The aliens, faced with a foe that refused to play by their rules, were on the back foot. Humanity had proven its adaptability was not only a strength, but could be weaponized, breaking their enemies the same way they sought to break them. The battle for Earth continued, but with a hard-won, brutal understanding. To survive, humanity would have to become something it never expected, a little less human with each victory. Rebuilding a fractured world. The war left its mark, both on the planet and its survivors. Scorched landscapes and ruined cities bore witness to the conflict, but so did the bodies of the humans themselves. Alex, his own form permanently scarred by the constant flux of forced adaptations, was a symbol of their brutal victory. Even in the moments of respite, he couldn't shake the hollow feeling that accompanied every forced change, his connection to his humanity slowly fraying. The alien remnants were scattered, disorganized. Without their network's rigid control, some devolved into mindless aggression, while others remained trapped within malfunctioning exoskeletons, their movements twitchy and unpredictable. The war was far from over, but it had entered a new, unsettling phase. In the tattered remnants of a global command base, the new High Council convened. Military leaders, scientists, and newly elected representatives of what remained of governments came together, bound by a shared trauma and an uncertain future. Alex, now more advisor than soldier, stood amongst them, a shadow of his former self, his words carrying the weight of someone who'd seen the cost of humanity's desperate evolution. "We cannot continue this way," he said, his voice harsh, echoing in the makeshift council room. "We can't keep twisting ourselves into something we're not. If the aliens come again, who will we be then?" Debate erupted, fiery and filled with clashing ideologies. Some advocated for further development of weapons that targeted the aliens' physiology, a continuation of the forced adaptation strategy that had saved them but at a terrible cost. Others spoke of diplomacy, of seeking out potential allies among the stars, believing their shared struggle against a common enemy could forge new bonds. Dr. Park, ever the voice of reason, proposed a different path. "The limits of adaptation are our greatest strength, not our weakness," he argued. "We must understand those limits, not just in our bodies, but in our society. Rigidity led to the aliens' downfall. It must not become ours." A program was devised. A controlled return to adaptability. Scientists began dismantling the salvaged alien tech, searching for any insight into how it might be safely integrated into human development without the need for destructive force. The crude exoskeleton prototypes were refined, designed to enhance natural human abilities rather than force a complete biological shift. It was slow, painstaking work. The world around them seemed poised on the brink of chaos. There were the fanatics, those who'd tasted the power of forced adaptation and craved its return. Others, broken by the war, retreated into fear and isolationism. Yet, a sense of community took hold. Humans, forever changed by the conflict, began rebuilding with a newfound appreciation for diversity, for the multitude of ways adaptability could manifest beyond brute strength. Alex, his role shifting again, volunteered to lead rehabilitation teams into conflict zones, aiding those who'd pushed their bodies too far, who needed help returning to a semblance of their former selves. He led workshops on controlled adaptation, teaching former soldiers how to harness their abilities without losing themselves to the process. One day, overlooking a city slowly rebuilding itself, he found General Carter standing beside him. Her gaze was fixed on the horizon, a contemplative frown on her weathered face. "We paid a heavy price," she said, her voice quiet. "We're still paying it," Alex replied. "But we survived," Carter countered. "We're different now, stronger in ways we couldn't have imagined." Alex watched a group of children playing amidst the rubble, their movements unnaturally fluid as they adapted to the uneven terrain. They were a new generation, born into a world where change was a necessity. "We won't make the same mistakes as the aliens," he finally said, a flicker of hope sparking within him. "We won't let ourselves become our own undoing." The recovery was not easy, nor was it guaranteed. Yet there was a relentless determination woven into the fabric of this battered humanity. They'd faced down extinction, learned the hard lessons of adaptation, and emerged scarred, but unbroken. From the ashes, a new world was being born, one shaped by the understanding that adaptability was more than mere survival. It was the ability to endure, to bend but not break, and to always find a way forward even when the path had been scorched away.